Hey, welcome everyone. It's great to see people. If you're new, welcome. If you're coming back, welcome. I'm Dr. Susan Pollack. I'm a co-founder of CMC and also co-director of our Grand Rounds. And we're very delighted that this is starting our third year. And we've created with you as well an international group. So what we'd like in the first minute or so before I do more introductions is just have you write where you're from so we can see who's here and where people are from. So again, welcome, and this will just go into the chat. So it's just wonderful to see everyone, especially those who are far away, not only Boston and Medford, but Denmark and other states. So, okay, yes. So, without further ado, I am absolutely delighted to welcome Kaira Lingo to kick off our grand rounds this year. And I'm not going to read the formal bio because I'm sure that's what you saw when you registered, but I really want to go right to the heart with just a warm introduction and welcome. So Kaira is part of an outstanding new generation of teachers with a voice that's authentic, wise, and loving. Kaira has a profound, deep, and inspiring practice, and you can really just feel the sincerity and kindness in her words. She was a nun in the tradition of the Vietnamese meditation master, Thich Nhat Hanh, a teacher who recently passed, of extraordinary wisdom and compassion. And I think you'll feel the depth of his teaching. We called him Thai in Kaira words as well. Kaira has a recent book out. I'm just going to hold it up, which I think is extraordinary. It's called We Were Made for These Times. And I find it both hopeful and motivating in times when it's so easy to lose heart. And let me end with something very pithy from the book. And I want to use this quote to frame the talk. And it's from a song in Plum Village, which was Thich Nhat Hanh's center in France. And it goes, I'm not going to sing, don't worry. I cannot add more days to my life, but only add more life to each day. And this book and your presence, I feel, add more life to today. So thank you so much for being here and kicking off our series, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Susan. What a heartwarming way to be welcomed. I really appreciate the chance to be here with you all and to dive into exploring how we might befriend eco-anxiety, as well as apply mindfulness to work with change, loss, disruption in general. So I'll just say that I use she, her pronouns, and that I honor the native peoples of the land that I reside on, the Merritt and Munsee Lenape tribes of Long Island. I'm in Garden City, Long Island. So, eco-anxiety, according to Wikipedia, is anxiety about ecological disasters and threats to the natural environment, like pollution and climate change. I want to talk about how this experience is both intelligent and adaptive, given what we're facing. We usually think of anxiety as something to be treated, to make it go away. But there are things we need to be anxious about that we can work with in helpful ways, so that they are naming something that needs to be named, and we can work with them in ways that are helpful for us and for the world around us. Connected to eco-anxiety is ecological grief, which Wikipedia also talks about as the grief felt in relation to experienced or anticipated ecological losses, including the loss of species, ecosystems, and meaningful landscapes due to acute or chronic environmental change. So my mom lives in Denver, and I went to visit her the other week, and as has been the case for probably a decade now, the beauty of the Rocky Mountains that I grew up seeing at a distance from Denver with their white caps, the snow on the tops of the peaks is no longer there. So this is a grief that I experience every time I look at that mountain range, that snow isn't there. It used to be there all year round, even through the summer. So eco-anxiety is not a response to something acute, a disturbing event, but it's a state of mind that arises gradually as we watch this unfolding, continuously present tragedy of the climate crisis, the climate emergency. And it can manifest as intense worry, rumination, insomnia, panic attacks, feelings of sadness, loss, guilt, hopelessness, irritability. So all the symptoms of anxiety and depression. And a 2021 survey from Yale University found that 70% of people in the United States are now very or somewhat worried about climate change, climate disruption. And more of them, more and more of us, show signs of anxiety or depression as a result of that worry. The study also found that 51% feel helpless about what's happening. So while it may not yet be in the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, it's probably coming as something to be really recognized, reckoned with, and clinicians, therapists, health professionals are realizing the need to get more training in how to care for and address these realities in the clients that they work with. But as I said, this isn't a disease. It's actually a very intelligent response to what's going on around us that I think we're all beginning to see more and more clearly with each passing year. So in a Guardian article, Joe Confino asks, why aren't we on the floor doubled up in pain at our capacity for industrial scale genocide of the world's species? Okay. So the pain we're experiencing is, it's the pain we would experience if we were, deeply hurt in our physical bodies, right? There's a part of each of our psyches that knows that we are connected to what's happening to the land, to the water, to the air, to other species. And we feel the pain of that, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. And so in 2018, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, warned that we have until 2030. They've since lowered, given less time even, to make drastic changes before our world becomes even more uninhabitable, because you could already say in a number of places it is already becoming uninhabitable. Where if you don't have air conditioning in the summer, you have a death sentence, perhaps. And so the pace is quickening of the intensity of what's happening. And so every year, more dire predictions, fear, despair. So this isn't pathological, this response. It's a healthy and realistic response to terrifying realities that are already here, and in many places already hugely disruptive to food production, to the ability to take care of oneself and meet one's basic needs. So 200 species go extinct every day. 75% of Arctic ice has melted in the last 30 years. So a 10% melt of Arctic ice would already signal a huge crisis. We've lost 75%. Half of the world's coral reefs have died in the last 30 years. And we are breaking each year records in heat waves, wildfires that are harder to control, unprecedented levels of flooding, with 1/3 of Pakistan underwater this past August. Millions and millions of people homeless in Pakistan due to the flooding. So let me just name that as we talk about these things, I also invite us to really track what's happening in our bodies. This is a lot to be facing. And so just inviting us to notice what's arising in our bodies and to be kind with ourselves and to hold ourselves as we explore this territory together. So yeah, just take a deep breath together, actually. So there are many natural systems and phenomena on our planet that will just never be the same again. We've actually gone past the point at which certain systems, ecosystems can be restored, right? So some people have stopped using the term sustainability because they see that's actually not the place that we're at anymore. We have, in certain cases, there's still many, many places where there's possibility to turn things around, but in certain areas, it's not about sustaining, it's about how do we confront loss that's irreplaceable, right? Those 200 species each day aren't coming back. So when we face that, when we look at that, growing eco-anxiety, grief, these are natural and adaptive as more of us become aware of the incredible harm that we humans, it is from us, let's not be confused here. We humans are causing to our planet this destruction, not only to our planet, but to other species and to our very selves, to our entire species. So this eco-anxiety, this psychological response is intelligent. It's our psyches hearing the SOS signals of our planet, of the life in which we are embedded, just as we would feel grief at the death of a loved one, or if our community were devastated by a natural disaster, by disease. So that they are natural, they have a place, these painful emotions, but they are also overwhelming and require a careful and intelligent response as well. So denial is one coping strategy that our especially fossil fuel industries have weaponized to really fund whole projects to deny and cover up the truth about what's happening and what's causing it. But it's also a very human response to something that's overwhelming. We have mechanisms of denial and defensiveness to help us protect ourselves. And we will only really be able to address the problems of this crisis if we can face our fear, our grief, and learn to fully and compassionately experience it, to not deny it, not turn away and, find something more entertaining, more comforting to soothe us. So we can't take actions to protect what we care about if we deny that there's a problem to begin with. So as James Baldwin, the great Black author and activist, said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So I think part of why denial is so seductive as a response is that so many of us find ourselves trying to hold this immensely disturbing reality by ourselves. We're alone in front of our computer screens, our phones, reading our papers, and our nervous systems aren't set up for this level of dissonance, right? Of like, we're living this life where we're being told we're believing in this one story, but this completely different story is unfolding, right? Where we want to wake up and have our breakfast and take our kids to school and, go for a bike ride. And then how do we reconcile that with 200 species are going to die today, are going to become extinct today? Yeah. So the hugeness of what faces us can only be adequately held and addressed in community with other living beings that we can hold hands with, that we can shake with, that we can cry with, that we can also envision with and dream up creative responses with. But we live more and more isolated lives where we are disconnected, vulnerable to messages that disempower us, that convince us that we don't have agency. So we tune out, we numb ourselves, we take refuge in some kind of consumption or busyness to find a relief from this painful experience. And this isn't only a hard reality for us to take in as individuals, but it's also something that our society, our media, even climate experts and sustainability researchers, they work very hard to sidestep and shield us from the full reality for many reasons. So if you're interested in reading more about that, Jem Bendel's work and others on deep adaptation explains more. So it's only slowly becoming acceptable to speak about the full extent of societal collapse due to climate disruption. So in addition to anxiety, we may experience guilt around what's happening. And there is a difference in the Buddhist understanding between wholesome remorse and unwholesome remorse. So there's guilt, where the experience of guilt is unwholesome remorse, according to Buddhist psychology, where we stay stuck in the past. We can't move forward because we are drowning in self-criticism, self-judgment, blame. So we can't act constructively. We can't release the energy that we have of care for our world if we are tied up by our guilt around climate. But wholesome remorse is different. It's the ability to move inward to really feel our grief. And that inward movement brings us outward again, giving us energy to act, to do something about how we are responsible, how we share in what's happening. So the inward movement is really important. This experience of humility, of taking responsibility for how we've benefited from and been part of ignorance, greed, violence, the destructiveness of our species. So it's important that we feel the pain of this, what we all participate in. As Brenda Peterson writes, it's never too late to go quietly to our oceans, lakes, rivers, and even small streams, to say to the seagulls, the bald eagles, the great blue herons, the salmon, we are sorry. And when we genuinely feel this, we are sorry, because we connect with the magnitude of what's happening, my experience is that opens up a wellspring of, and here's what I want to do to protect the beauty of the life that I see, that I'm connected to. I wouldn't feel sorry if I didn't know my connection to this wondrous expression of life, right? So we can help our wholesome remorse find expression by taking concrete actions to resist, to alleviate the destruction that's happening in our world, and act in solidarity with those that are most impacted by climate change, those that are marginalized, poor, people of color, those living in the global south. We see this. There are climate refugees whose lives and livelihoods are already in peril and have been for some time. So I'll talk a little more about this towards the end. But I want to share at this point about how we might meet eco-anxiety with compassion, and how we might also bring in acceptance to what is unknown, what we can't control. I just want to pause and look at you all and just invite you to maybe make a gesture with your body that expresses what you're experiencing at this moment in time. Like, how are you as we go into this exploration? So I'll just give everyone a moment to just make whatever gesture with your body that, yeah, thank you. Oh, yes. Expressions of care, expressions of heaviness, expressions of holding. Thank you. No, it's important that we are circulating, right? Our feelings, our expressions, and seeing each other going through this with us. Yeah, thank you for that. So, so there's this tendency to deny or to become immobilized by guilt in the face of what's unfolding, but shutting down or becoming frozen, it's not a very effective way to respond to the collapse that's already underway. Just as, burying our heads in the sand wouldn't be very helpful. What is much better is to meet our tendency to withdraw with compassion rather than judgment or shame. So none of us needs to judge ourselves or others for how we are meeting this experience, but rather if we were to really develop creative ways to adapt to this new reality together, that's possible if we can accept and befriend our pain, our sadness, our fear, our worry. So it's really through compassion that we can come to a helpful response. So just knowing that each of us is in some kind of traumatic response to probably the greatest traumatic event that our species has yet encountered can help us hold each other with compassion rather than blame or judgment. So self-compassion has incredible power, and it's a tool of climate resilience that can help us meet the pain of eco-anxiety. So Kristen Neff cites research done with veterans who've come back from wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that what determined whether or not they developed PTSD was not how much combat they had experienced in the war, but whether or not they had self-compassion. So those who had self-compassion, the ability to care for their pain, to care for their fear, to not judge themselves, but to feel kindness towards their vulnerability, they didn't develop PTSD. Right? They were exposed to the same traumatizing events, but their ability to hold themselves with kindness kept them from developing PTSD. So, in addition to compassion and honoring our pain, really slowing down enough to notice, oh, I feel the earth crying, right? In my body, in my psyche. We actually need to slow down enough to feel that and to have compassion for that experience. So the other piece of this, really responding caringly to what we're going through is acceptance, is coming to terms with what's really happening. And it's not that the whole story is written already, but we know certain parts of it are happening, right? So we could think of it as we've been given a kind of terminal diagnosis as a species, right? Our scientists, experts are saying we have to make major changes if this, plane, this plane of our human society is going to stay in the air. And our tendency, given this diagnosis, is to deny it, to resist it. But actually accepting the gravity of our situation can bring us to a great deal more empowerment and even peace. And it can be healing and even refreshing, as counterintuitive as that sounds. So if we can be completely open to the full range of our emotions around climate change, we can welcome, we can befriend them so that the power they hold, I mean, these emotions can be huge sources of energy that can be directed towards meaningful action. But if we don't see things as they are, then we don't have access to the real capacity that each one of us has to respond. So in the world, we have a Buddhist approach to peace and ecology. The Zen teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, he tells the story of a senior nun from Vietnam who came to visit Plum Village, his monastery in France. And she had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and was given 3 or 4 months to live. The cancer had metastasized through her whole body. She accepted this diagnosis and she said, well, if I only have 3 months, I want to go to this monastery and practice wholeheartedly mindfulness from moment to moment. And so that's what she did. She put all of her energy into being awake in every moment of the days she had left. She was aware of her breathing. She was aware of stepping mindfully. She was aware of her bodily movements, of how she communicated with others. And then at the end of that time, before she was about to return to Hanoi, where she expected to die, a sister persuaded her to get a checkup from a doctor in France. And the doctors found that all the metastasized cancer had receded to just one area. And she lived for another 14 years. So Thich Nhat Hanh writes, the Buddha taught that all phenomena are impermanent. There is birth, then there is death. Our civilization is also like that. In the history of the earth, many civilizations have ended. If our modern civilization is destroyed, it follows the law of impermanence. If our human race continues to live in ignorance and in the bottomless pit of greed as at present, then the destruction of this civilization is not very far away. We have to accept this truth, just like we accept our own death. Once we accept it, we will not react with anger, denial, and despair anymore. We will have peace. Once we have peace, we will know how to live so that the earth has a future, so that we can come together in the spirit of siblinghood and apply the modern technology available to us in order to save our beloved green planet. If not, we will die from mental anguish before our civilization actually terminates. So he tells this story, which is for me a collective metaphor of this nun, that we are facing possible extinction. There's still things we can do to avoid this, but we are pretty much on a very direct path right now away from those choices that would help us. If we can accept that things are going to change, maybe end, and that we are really on the brink of collapse, this can wake us up. If we really accept it, it can wake us up and we can put our whole hearts living deeply, fully as a human species with other species on the earth, treasuring them as we treasure ourselves. We can say, okay, we've messed this up. Now we just have a little bit of time. How do we want to live? How do we want to care for this only place in the whole universe that we can call home. Well, what would be possible if we really took it seriously that we may not have a future? How would we want to use this next decade to fully integrate this reality? What could that make possible that hasn't yet been possible? Right? If we really accepted that we're coming so close to no return. And already this planet has become a hell for many, without enough food, without enough basic needs. Right? Those numbers of people are growing every year. So what do we do with that? How do we use that to really say, now, all my energy needs to go towards waking myself up, waking other people up, so there can be a collective awakening. Right? We still have a lot that's possible to change, but we have to wake up together to make those decisions. So there's something that mindfulness can offer us in terms of contemplating impermanence and coming to terms with, coming to peace with everything that arises will pass away, including cultures, including civilizations. And if we really open to that, then we can source our action not in fear and panic, but in love, in wisdom, and that can enable us to have a truly healing effect on the process that we're going through. Because the energy that we're acting out of whenever we respond, especially to a crisis, is really important. If we're acting out of panic, if we're acting out of aversion and anger and blame, that's going to be what we create. But if we are acting out of clarity, out of care, out of compassion, even in response to a very terrible crisis, that is what we're going to create, right? So it's like A.J. Musty's great statement, there is no way to peace. Peace is the way. You don't get to peace by, blaming and cursing and, judging and hating other people. You don't get to peace that way, right? So we have to be peace, to create peace, to manifest peace. We have to be able to touch that in our lives as we live. So back to this, seeing our society as a plane in the air. It's all the indications are that this plane cannot stay flying, right? And it can either nosedive and burst into flames on impact, or if we really take seriously that this plane is not going to be able to stay on its current trajectory, maybe there's a way we can make the descent softer and more gradual so that there's less harm, less suffering to everyone involved. So we have to accept that the plane can't keep flying in order to start figuring out how to make a more graceful descent. We're not there yet in our collective consciousness. I would say the vast majority of people are wanting to do everything we can to keep the plane flying as it has been all this time in the air, right? This is business as usual approach, right? Let's just use up all the fossil fuel before we make real changes, before we run out. Let's not have to really make any big shifts in our lives. But maybe the structures that we have aren't meant to be saved, all of them. If they create so much devastation, so much destruction, maybe there's something better than these structures that could come into being, right? So our current systems don't support all beings to live well. Very few beings can live well in the systems that we have. So if we accept that there's, this plane has to land, but we can help it land with as little harm as possible, maybe there are other systems that can arise that will support the dignity of all of life. So I want to speak now about also how we can just be in the not knowing of all of this, how that's a very potent and powerful place. That's part of what's so hard about this process of change, is that as we see our world unraveling, and like COVID's not going anywhere, it just keeps changing, and we try to adapt, but like, who knows when the next thing that's going to disrupt our society will emerge. So what makes this so hard is the uncertainty, right? But what I talk about in this book, We Were Made for These Times, is that there's a lot of possibility in not knowing. It's a very uncomfortable place, but we can learn to become more comfortable in that place. There's this tendency to lean forward to try to figure out the future. But there's also the possibility of resting back and trusting the unknown. Right? And our nervous systems are built to seek safety by trying to know what's going to happen. So it's a very difficult thing. It's not how we're wired, but it's possible to cultivate other ways of knowing, right? Science is about knowing through our rational minds. And that's one way of knowing, very important. But we also have other means of knowing. And that's one of the things mindfulness also helps us to tap into: intuition, embodied knowing, opening to what's here and now, what we can know with all of our senses, with our collective consciousness, right? These other ways of knowing tell us that we already know enough for right now in this moment. Actually, we don't have to lean forward to figure out more, to predict, to control. We don't have to worry, right? If we really inhabit this moment deeply, we know that this moment contains every other moment in it, right? This is the quantum physics of time not being linear. So the future is made of this moment. And if we are deeply in this moment, if we can just be in this moment, we will have everything we need to meet the next moment. Right? So this is something that I learned in my process of disrobing as a nun, which was a very difficult moment in my life, losing my identity pretty completely, of everything that I had learned to take refuge in and have as this sense of solid ground under my feet. It was all starting to fall away, and I didn't know who I was going to be if, myself as a nun dissolved. It was very disorienting, but I had the great fortune to just sit in stillness for many months, through some years of just holding the question, am I supposed to stay a nun? Is there something else I'm supposed to do with my life? And I was able to learn that I could be with that discomfort of the not knowing. I could trust the darkness. I didn't have to get an answer right away to get out of that discomfort. So it's like a caterpillar that creates this cocoon and then it dissolves into this soup. The caterpillar completely loses its identity, its structure. It digests itself. But in this soup are special cells. They're called imaginal cells, and they have all the DNA, all the information necessary for its next step, which is to form into a butterfly. And so if we look at our collective, there is this dissolving, this very painful, difficult, scary, we don't know what's happening, what's going to come next. But it is possible to be with this moment of uncertainty, of not knowing, to listen, to slow down, to not try to figure it out, and trust that we also collectively have imaginal cells that are in this soup of our collective dissolving that have everything we need to make whatever comes next. The next stage of our unfolding as a species and of life on this planet. So we're not doing this alone. No, we don't have to figure this all out by ourselves. We have each other. We have the intelligence of Gaia, which we can really open to connect with. We have like scientific ancestors like James Lovelock, who passed away in July, who offered us this Gaia hypothesis of the earth as an intelligent living organism. But we also have our wisdom traditions, and we have the wisdom of other species as well. So there's actually great possibility in not knowing, way more possibility in the not knowing than there is in the known. Right? If we know the answer, there's just one thing that can happen. If we don't know, then there are countless things that can happen. So just an invitation to see the not knowing as a doorway. So I want to close by sharing an insight from Donella Meadows, a systems thinker, theorist. She wrote leverage points, places to intervene in a system. So leverage points are places within complex systems like organizations, governments, cities, living body, and ecosystem. Leverage points are places where a small shift in one thing can change everything. And so she wrote a paper on the top most significant places to intervene in the system to influence change. And the most important leverage point, she said, was the power to transcend paradigms. So I'm going to read you this description of why this is such an important place. She said, there is yet one leverage point that is even higher than changing a paradigm. And that is to keep oneself unattached in the arena of paradigms, to stay flexible, to realize that no paradigm is true, that every one, including the one that sweetly shapes your own worldview, is a tremendously limited understanding of an immense and amazing universe that is far beyond human comprehension. It is to get at a gut level the paradigm that there are paradigms, and to see that that itself is a paradigm, and to regard the whole realization as devastatingly funny. It is to let go into not knowing what the Buddhists call enlightenment. People who cling to paradigms, which means just about all of us, take one look at the spacious possibility that everything they think is guaranteed to be nonsense and pedal rapidly in the opposite direction. Surely there is no power, no control, no understanding, not even a reason for being, much less acting, in the notion or experience that there is no certainty in any worldview. But in fact, everyone who has managed to entertain that idea for a moment or for a lifetime has found it to be the basis for radical empowerment. If no paradigm is right, you can choose whatever one will help to achieve your purpose. If you have no idea where to get a purpose, you can listen to the universe or put in the name of your favorite deity here and do its will, which is probably a lot better informed than your will. It is in this space of mastery over paradigms that people throw off addictions, live in constant joy, bring down empires, get locked up or burned at the stake or crucified or shot, and have impacts that last for millennia. So may we learn to rest in the power of the unknown and access the leverage points of transcending paradigms as we work to heal ourselves and our world.
Thank you so much, Kaira Jill, for a talk that is wise, thoughtful, hopeful, informed, and creative. So we have a few minutes now for questions. What we usually like to do is have people raise their golden hand. If you don't know how to do that, go to the bottom of your screen. You can click on reactions, and there's a raise hand function. And while people are raising their golden hands, I just want to mention that our next Grand Rounds will be with Eric Garland on October 3rd. And thank you. Okay, great. We have some golden hands already. And can we call on Janae House? I don't see a person there, but if you can appear, if you can manifest, that would be lovely.
I'm having camera problems, so
Don't worry,
just
we can
audio.
hear you. We can hear you. Welcome.
I was just I've had the impression of this entity of eco-anxiety, but didn't have a name for it. So I was just really impressed with hearing what you were saying, and it kind of meshed with what I was thinking, and then gave me some resources to think about. So I just wanted to compliment you on that.
Thank you, Janae. Yeah, and just really want to name that I think we're all experiencing that, right? That there is this uneasiness that's there in every one of us. It would be impossible for it not to be. So thank you for sharing that. And I hope you feel the humanity of what you just expressed, that's
Yes.
there in each of us.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Cheryl, please.
Hi, thank you, Kaira Jewel Lingo, for a very helpful and intelligent and compassionate talk. I am a bit spoiled. I would love it if there was a guided meditation related to this that you could maybe offer us.
Yes, I have an article on befriending eco-anxiety with 4 guided meditations, and I'll put that in the link. So if they're helpful, and there are a number of other apps and places where you can find some of these meditations like the Plum Village app or Insight Timer. But that's the part 1 of Befriending Anxiety article. And in part 2, there are several guided meditation practices, 10 minutes, 15 minutes long, that can be supportive. Thanks for the question. Risha, I see your hand up, please.
Hi, Kaira Jewel. Thank
Hi.
you so much for being here. I feel like I've been wrapped in a warm, very spacious, like blanket, and also had like a fire lit under me. And the balance there is just, thank you for your generosity in choosing to focus the way that you are in your practice and your teaching, and today with us on this. I've been noticing that I kind of have a question about practice, and noticing in my own life the ways that catastrophic loss can really wake me up, and so for so many people. And there's a kind of window of things aren't how I thought they were, and the role of creativity, possibility, seeing things really anew is there. And then habit creeps back in. And I feel like on a daily basis, the role of practice as stabilizing and as disrupting. We could choose to use our practice in any way for whatever intent we're trying to practice for. So I just wanted to know for yourself, how has this shaped your practice, and how do you kind of practice loss every day?
Thanks for that question. I was reflecting on this recently. I was teaching a BIPOC eco-dharma retreat where we had a grief ceremony where we invited people to come and really express their grief. And I've done this in different places, but creating a ritualized environment that's held, that has a container, because grief can also, it can be an endless place that we also can get, can lose our energy in. And so we need to have a container where we can dip into that and use that, as you said, to kind of, experience what we deeply care about, and the energy that we do have to move things in one direction or another. So creating spaces with others where we can actually express our pain. The work that Reconnects by Joanna Macy has some beautiful exercises that are very well held. The Truth Mandala, for instance. But individually, for myself, I find one of the things that helps me to touch loss in a way that's generative is prayer, is really opening my heart to the suffering that I experience, that others experience, whether it's through loving kindness, compassion practice, praying for those that I know are going through a difficult time, Tonglen. All of these are individual ways that help us metabolize suffering and be with it, not turn away from it, but also not be overcome by it. And I just want to name that Bhikkhu Bodhi has a beautiful description of compassion in his work on the Abhidhamma, where he says compassion, which in English, it really means to suffer with. He says the word in the Pali, in the original text, it's a joyful experience when you connect with the suffering of others with the deep wish to relieve that suffering. It's not an experience that brings you down into something where you feel helpless, right? So compassion, it's not where we dive in and we drown with someone who's drowning. It's something where we are steady enough to be able to pull someone out of the water.
Mhm.
We care about them deeply, but we have something that they can grab onto. And so anyway, just to say that that experience of compassion is a joyful, life-giving emotion.
Oh, I'm sorry we're out of time, but thank you from all of us for this joyful presentation. It was a pleasure, and we hope we can stay in touch with you. And please join us on October 3rd for Eric Garland. And great to see everyone again. And thank you so much, Kaira Jewel.
Thank you all so much. Really good to be with you.
Great to be with you.
Wish you well.